Welcome to the world of daily life stories. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss new stories. Enjoy listening. A quiet entrance. The airport was bustling, a symphony of movement and sound. Travelers hurried by, some dragging heavy suitcases, while others balanced coffee cups and boarding passes. The overhead speakers announced flight updates, their metallic tones blending with the murmur of countless conversations. Amid the chaos, Rachel Monroe moved with quiet confidence. Her small leather carry-on glided smoothly behind her, its polished surface catching the faint gleam of fluorescent lights. Rachel was used to this, traveling alone, navigating busy airports, and observing the world around her without making much of a splash. Her understated navy blue blazer and cream blouse, paired with tailored trousers, gave her an air of sophistication without extravagance. She carried herself with an ease that belied the countless hours she had spent in boardrooms and executive suites. She was no stranger to commanding attention, but she preferred to do so on her terms. Today, Rachel was headed to Chicago. It wasn't just another trip, it was the culmination of weeks of intense negotiations. She'd closed a deal that many had called impossible. Yet here she was, calmly waiting in line at the airline service desk, her mind already moving to the next challenge. The line was slow, but Rachel didn't mind. She used the time to check emails on her phone, responding to a few urgent messages with the precision of someone who knew how to prioritize. She glanced at her watch. Boarding for her flight wouldn't start for another hour. She had time to inquire about an upgrade, a small luxury she rarely indulged in, but after the exhausting week, it felt justified. When her turn finally arrived, Rachel stepped forward with her usual composure. The counter was manned by two employees, Amanda and Jason. Amanda, a young woman with bright red nails and an air of impatience, was idly twirling a pen while staring at her computer screen. Jason, who seemed slightly older, adjusted his tie and tapped distractedly at the keyboard. Neither looked up as Rachel approached. "Good afternoon," Rachel began, her tone calm and polite. Amanda glanced up, her expression betraying a flicker of irritation before settling into a forced smile. "What can I help you with?" Rachel placed her boarding pass on the counter. "I wanted to ask if there are any first-class upgrades available for Flight 308 to Chicago." Amanda's smile tightened. She exchanged a quick, knowing look with Jason, whose lips curled into a smirk. Rachel noticed but said nothing, waiting patiently for a response. Jason leaned over to Amanda, whispering something that made her stifle a laugh. Rachel's sharp eyes caught the subtle roll of Amanda's eyes before she turned her attention back to the computer screen. "Well," Amanda said, drawing out the word as if it were a burden to even respond, "first-class upgrades are, a little pricey." "Are you sure that's something you'd want to consider?" Rachel's polite smile didn't waver. "I'd just like to know if there's availability." Jason chuckled under his breath. "Availability? Sure. But it might not be within reach. You'd be surprised how expensive those seats can get." Their condescension was palpable, but Rachel didn't rise to it. Instead, she calmly asked, "Could you please check?" Amanda sighed theatrically and began typing. "Well, let's see what we've got." She didn't bother to hide the exaggerated slowness of her movements. Jason leaned casually against the counter, watching Rachel with a smug grin. As Amanda clicked through the system, she remarked, "It's funny. We get people asking for upgrades all the time. Some don't even realize how exclusive first class really is." Her tone dripped with mockery, and Jason chuckled again, clearly enjoying the moment. Rachel's expression remained neutral. She'd faced far more challenging situations than this and wasn't about to let a couple of smug employees rattle her. Still, the lack of professionalism was disappointing. She expected more from an international airline. "Well," Amanda said finally, "there are a couple of seats left. But like I said, they're quite pricey. Maybe you'd prefer sticking with economy? Just to be realistic." Jason laughed outright this time, his amusement obvious. Rachel glanced at him, her gaze cool and measured, before returning her attention to Amanda. "That won't be necessary," Rachel replied evenly. I'll take the upgrade. Please process it. Amanda blinked, clearly thrown off by Rachel's calm decisiveness. Jason straightened up, his smirk faltering. Oh, Amanda said, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. Well, okay. I'll just need your payment method. Rachel handed over her credit card without a word, her composed demeanor unshaken. Amanda processed the transaction in awkward silence, the air between them suddenly tense. Jason avoided making eye contact, his earlier bravado nowhere to be found. As Amanda handed back the card and boarding pass, Rachel thanked her with the same polite smile she'd worn since the beginning. Then, she walked away, leaving the duo at the counter to exchange uneasy glances. What Amanda and Jason didn't know, what they couldn't possibly have guessed, was who Rachel Monroe really was. In less than 10 minutes, their smugness would turn to shock. The power dynamics at this busy airport were about to shift in a way neither of them could have imagined. And when the truth came out, it would be a lesson they'd never forget. Rachel was not just a passenger. She was the CEO of a Fortune 500 company, a major shareholder in the very airline they worked for, and a woman who believed in accountability. But she didn't need to flaunt her status to prove her worth. Instead, Rachel preferred to let actions speak louder than words. And in this case, the consequences of Amanda and Jason's behavior would speak volumes. The tables began to turn. Rachel settled into a quiet corner of the first-class lounge, her upgraded boarding pass tucked neatly into the pocket of her blazer. The lounge was a haven compared to the chaos outside, plush chairs, muted lighting, and the gentle hum of soft jazz playing in the background. A server approached with a warm smile, offering her a glass of sparkling water, which she accepted with a nod of gratitude. Rachel wasn't one to let a moment like the one at the counter sour her day, but she also wasn't one to ignore blatant disrespect. Her calm exterior belied a sharp mind already piecing together the next steps. This wasn't the first time she'd encountered such behavior, and sadly, it wouldn't be the last. Yet every time it happened, it served as a stark reminder of why she worked so hard to be where she was. While sipping her water, Rachel pulled out her phone. With a few quick taps, she composed a concise email to the airline's executive team. She detailed the interaction at the counter, sparing no detail about the condescension she'd faced. She wasn't angry, she was meticulous. Rachel didn't demand immediate action, nor did she threaten consequences. Instead, she framed her concerns as constructive feedback, the kind that made it clear she wasn't just any passenger, she was someone who cared deeply about the airline's reputation and customer experience. The email ended with her name, signature, and the titles that would inevitably turn heads: Rachel Monroe, CEO, Lumina Enterprises, major shareholder, Horizon Airways. She sent it off with a swipe, then leaned back in her chair, taking a moment to enjoy the serenity of the lounge. Meanwhile, back at the service desk, Amanda and Jason's laughter had subsided. A supervisor had passed by a few minutes earlier, prompting them to adopt a facade of professionalism. But Amanda couldn't resist leaning closer to Jason, her voice low but still audible. "Did you see her face?" "Like she really thought she belonged in first class," Amanda said with a smirk. Jason chuckled. "Yeah, probably blew her whole paycheck on that upgrade. Bet she'll be eating peanuts for the rest of the month." Unbeknownst to them, their conversation was overheard by another passenger in line, a middle-aged man in a tailored suit who raised an eyebrow at their comments. He glanced at their name tags, his expression hardening as he made a mental note of their names. He'd seen plenty of unprofessional behavior in his years as a corporate executive, but this was particularly distasteful. Rachel's email reached the airline's executive offices almost immediately. Thanks to her status as a major shareholder, her correspondence was flagged as high priority. Within minutes, it landed in the inbox of Karen Liu, the airline's chief operating officer. Karen was known for her no-nonsense approach to management and her relentless focus on upholding the company's values. As Karen read through Rachel's email, her jaw tightened. She had met Rachel several times at shareholder meetings and deeply respected her insight and professionalism. The fact that someone of Rachel's caliber had been treated so poorly was unacceptable. Karen forwarded the email to the airline's customer experience director with a single line. Address this immediately. I want a full report by end of day. Back at the lounge, Rachel's phone buzzed with a reply from Karen. It was brief but reassuring. Dear Ms. Monroe. Thank you for bringing this to our attention. Please know that we take matters like these very seriously. I will personally ensure this is addressed promptly. Safe travels, and thank you for your continued support of Horizon Airways. Best regards, Karen Lu, COO, Horizon Airways. Rachel smiled faintly. Karen's prompt response was a testament to her integrity, but Rachel knew this was only the beginning. Change required more than emails, it required accountability. The flight that changed everything. When it was time to board, Rachel made her way to the gate. The first-class line moved quickly, and she was soon settled into her spacious seat by the window. She pulled out a book, her expression serene as the cabin crew prepared for takeoff. About 15 minutes into the flight, Rachel noticed a flurry of activity among the crew. A senior flight attendant approached her, bending slightly to speak in a low voice. Ms. Monroe, we've just received a message from corporate. The COO has asked me to ensure your flight experience is exceptional. If there's anything you need, please don't hesitate to let me know. Rachel thanked her graciously, though she suspected this was only the beginning of the ripple effects her email had set in motion. Meanwhile, back at the airport, Amanda and Jason's shift was taking an unexpected turn. Their supervisor had received a call from corporate, instructing her to review footage from the service desk and speak with the employees involved. By the time Amanda and Jason returned from their lunch break, they were met with stern faces and an order to report to the supervisor's office. As they sat in the cramped room, the supervisor played back the footage, their earlier remarks about Rachel clearly audible. Amanda's face turned pale, while Jason shifted uncomfortably in his seat. This behavior is unacceptable, the supervisor said firmly. Not only did you fail to provide basic courtesy to a passenger, but you also mocked her in front of other customers. Do you have any idea who that passenger was? Amanda's voice was barely above a whisper. And no. The supervisor leaned forward, her eyes blazing. That was Rachel Monroe, one of our largest shareholders and the CEO of a Fortune 500 company. She has done more for this airline than either of you can imagine. And you treated her with utter disrespect. Jason tried to interject, but the supervisor held up a hand. Save it. Corporate will be handling this from here. For now, consider yourself suspended, pending further review. The reality of their situation began to sink in as they left the office in silence, their earlier smugness replaced by dread. A lesson learned. By the time Rachel's flight landed in Chicago, the consequences of Amanda and Jason's actions were already unfolding. Karen Lu had initiated a company-wide review of customer service protocols, determined to prevent such incidents from happening again. Rachel's story was shared in internal training sessions as an example of why every passenger deserved respect, regardless of appearance or perceived status. As Rachel stepped off the plane, she was greeted by a senior airline representative waiting at the gate. Ms. Monroe, on behalf of Horizon Airways, I want to personally apologize for the experience you had earlier. Rest assured, steps are being taken to address it. We value your feedback and your continued support. Rachel nodded graciously. Thank you. I appreciate your swift response. As she walked through the terminal, Rachel couldn't help but reflect on the events of the day. She hadn't sought to humiliate anyone, she had simply demanded the respect every passenger deserved. And in doing so, she had reminded an entire organization of the power of quiet integrity and the importance of accountability. For Amanda and Jason, the lesson would be far more personal. And for Rachel, it was just another day of quietly shaping the world around her, one flight at a time. The power of the unexpected. Rachel's request hung in the air like a quiet storm about to break. Amanda barely concealed her smirk as she exchanged a look with Jason. Their silent mockery was deafening, and Rachel could feel it in the way their postures shifted and their eyes refused to meet hers directly. Jason, emboldened by Amanda's dismissive attitude, leaned slightly over the counter. First-class upgrades are pretty exclusive, he said, his tone dripping with condescension. Not sure if this is really the right line for that kind of request. Rachel tilted her head slightly, her calm demeanor unshaken. I understand, she said. I just wanted to check if there might be any availability. I'm happy to pay the difference. Amanda, twirling her pen again, gave a dramatic sigh. Even if there were upgrades, they wouldn't be cheap. First class isn't exactly, she paused, as if searching for the words, before finishing with a slight smirk, for everyone. Rachel studied them both for a moment. Their thinly veiled insinuations were as clear as the fluorescent lights overhead. Still, she refused to give them the satisfaction of seeing her rattled. Instead, she leaned in slightly, her voice lowering just enough to draw their attention. I see, she said. Thank you for letting me know. Is there someone else I could speak with? Perhaps a supervisor? Amanda blinked, her smirk faltering for a split second before returning with twice the force. Oh, there's no need for that, she said quickly. We're perfectly capable of handling this. But like I said, there's no availability in first class right now. Jason chimed in, clearly enjoying the performance. Yeah, even if there was, we usually reserve those spots for, well, you know, frequent flyers, VIPs, people with the right credentials. For a moment, Rachel said nothing. Then, with a faint smile, she nodded. I understand. Thank you for your help. She stepped aside, her expression composed, and pulled out her phone. The interaction had attracted the attention of a few other passengers in line, who whispered among themselves, their curiosity piqued. Rachel, however, appeared unbothered as she typed a quick message. Her thumbs moved deftly over the screen before she put the phone away and took a seat in a nearby lounge chair, her small carry-on resting neatly at her feet. Amanda and Jason exchanged a look of triumph. They believed they had successfully put the entitled woman in her place. What they didn't know was that their moment of smugness was about to be shattered. 10 minutes later, the atmosphere around the service desk shifted abruptly. A man in a crisp suit, with a name badge identifying him as an operations manager, approached the counter with purpose. Behind him, 2 other staff members followed closely, their expressions serious. Amanda, Jason, the manager began, his voice firm but calm, I need you to step aside. Now. The 2 employees looked up in surprise, their earlier confidence evaporating. What's going on? Amanda asked, her voice tinged with nervousness. We've received a report regarding your interaction with a passenger, the manager said. This is not the time or place for explanations. Please follow me to the back office. Jason's face paled. But we didn't do anything wrong, he stammered. It was just a routine interaction. The manager held up a hand, cutting him off. This isn't up for debate. Come with me. As Amanda and Jason reluctantly left the counter, whispering frantically to each other, Rachel stood from her seat and approached the desk. The manager's demeanor shifted immediately when he saw her, his expression softening into one of professional respect. Ms. Monroe, he said, extending a hand. My sincerest apologies for the behavior of our staff. It's completely unacceptable and does not reflect the values of our airline. Rachel shook his hand, her grip firm but gracious. Thank you for addressing the matter so promptly, she said. I appreciate your efforts. The passengers nearby watched in stunned silence as the manager escorted Rachel to the first-class lounge, where she was greeted with the utmost courtesy. Within moments, her upgrade was confirmed, and she was settled into a plush seat, a glass of sparkling water in hand. Back at the counter, Amanda and Jason sat in the back office, facing an uncomfortable reality. The operations manager, flanked by an HR representative, laid out the consequences of their actions in no uncertain terms. Their mockery, their unprofessional conduct, and their failure to treat Rachel with basic respect had cost them their jobs. What you failed to realize, the manager said, his tone sharp, is that Ms. Monroe is not just any passenger. She is a senior executive with a major partner of this airline. Your behavior not only disrespected her but also jeopardized our relationship with one of our most important clients." Amanda's face was a picture of disbelief. "But we didn't know." "It's not about knowing who someone is," the manager interrupted. "It's about treating every passenger with the respect and professionalism they deserve." Meanwhile, Rachel sat in the lounge, her phone buzzing with messages from colleagues and friends. She replied to a few before leaning back in her seat, letting the tension of the day melt away. She hadn't set out to make an example of anyone, but she also wasn't the type to let disrespect go unchecked. As the announcement for her flight came over the speakers, she stood and made her way to the boarding gate, where a member of the airline's senior staff personally escorted her onto the plane. Settling into her first-class seat, Rachel allowed herself a small smile. Justice, she thought, wasn't always loud. Sometimes, it was as quiet and powerful as a well-timed word. In the end, Amanda and Jason learned the hard way what Rachel had always known: kindness and professionalism cost nothing, but their absence could cost everything. A quiet storm breaks. The flight from Atlanta to Chicago was smooth, with the faint hum of engines providing a comforting backdrop. Rachel leaned back in her spacious first-class seat, her tablet resting on her lap as she reviewed documents for her upcoming meeting. The leather seat cradled her comfortably, a stark contrast to the tension-filled encounter earlier that day. She sipped her herbal tea, her mind briefly wandering back to Amanda and Jason. It wasn't that Rachel harbored ill will toward them. She'd long ago learned that some people's prejudices and assumptions came not from malice, but ignorance. Still, their behavior was unprofessional and entirely unacceptable. Rachel believed in accountability, not out of spite, but because allowing such attitudes to persist could harm others who might not have the means to stand up for themselves. As the plane soared through the clouds, she decided to focus her energy on her upcoming tasks. But little did she know, the ripple effects of the morning's events were still unfolding below. At the airline's corporate headquarters, a series of urgent emails and phone calls had been set into motion. Rachel's message earlier that day had been forwarded directly to the CEO's office. Accompanied by her detailed account of the incident, it outlined not only the specific behavior of Amanda and Jason, but also raised concerns about the training and culture that allowed such conduct to occur. Rachel's tone was measured and professional, but her words carried weight. As a high-ranking executive and a major corporate partner of the airline, she knew how to communicate effectively. Her message didn't just call for disciplinary action, it proposed solutions. She recommended implementing enhanced customer service training, focusing on bias awareness, and creating an anonymous reporting system for passengers and employees alike. When the CEO read her email, he didn't just see a complaint, he saw an opportunity. Rachel Monroe wasn't just any executive, her reputation as a leader in diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives was well known in corporate circles. Her suggestions carried a level of expertise that couldn't be ignored. Within hours, the CEO had convened a meeting with the airline's senior leadership team. They dissected the incident, reviewed Rachel's recommendations, and discussed how to move forward. What had started as an embarrassing episode for two employees at an airport service desk was quickly becoming a catalyst for change at the highest levels of the company. Meanwhile, back in Chicago, Rachel arrived at her destination and stepped into the elegant lobby of a skyscraper downtown. The meeting she was preparing for wasn't just any meeting, it was a quarterly strategy session with key executives from her company and several of their major partners, including the airline she had flown with that morning. Rachel's entrance was unassuming, but heads turned as she walked into the conference room. Her colleagues and counterparts greeted her warmly, exchanging pleasantries before diving into the day's agenda. As discussions began, Rachel's sharp insights and strategic thinking quickly reminded everyone why she was such a respected figure in the industry. During a break, the airline's chief operating officer approached her. "Rachel," he began, his tone genuinely apologetic, "I heard about what happened this morning. I want to personally apologize for the behavior of our staff. It was completely unacceptable, and I assure you we're taking immediate action to address it." Rachel's expression softened. "Thank you, Andrew. I appreciate that, she said. I'm not looking to punish anyone unnecessarily, but I do hope this becomes an opportunity for growth within your organization. He nodded. It already has. Your feedback was invaluable. We're implementing new training programs and reviewing our policies to ensure this doesn't happen again. And if you're open to it, I'd love to collaborate with you on some of these initiatives. Your expertise could help us make a real difference. Rachel smiled. I'd be happy to help. Let's discuss it further once things settle down. Back at the airline's Atlanta office, Amanda and Jason's world had turned upside down. They'd been suspended pending a full investigation, and the HR team had begun interviewing witnesses and reviewing security footage. It was clear that their behavior was indefensible. For Amanda, the realization hit hard. She'd never thought of herself as prejudiced, but her actions that morning had revealed a troubling bias. Sitting in the HR office, she was forced to confront the consequences of her behavior. Jason, on the other hand, was defensive at first, insisting that their actions had been blown out of proportion. But as the evidence mounted, even he had to admit that they had crossed a line. The airline's leadership team decided to make an example of the situation, not out of spite, but to underscore their commitment to a respectful and inclusive culture. Amanda and Jason were terminated, but they were also offered resources to help them learn from the experience, including access to counseling and training programs. For Rachel, the day's events were a reminder of both the challenges and the opportunities that came with her position. As a Black woman in a leadership role, she was no stranger to microaggressions and outright discrimination. But she had also built a career on turning obstacles into stepping stones. Her quiet power wasn't just about achieving success, despite the odds, it was about using her success to create a better path for those who came after her. Whether it was advocating for systemic change within an airline or mentoring young professionals in her industry, Rachel's influence was profound and far-reaching. As she boarded her return flight later that week, Rachel noticed a subtle but significant shift in the staff's demeanor. They were attentive, professional, and genuinely kind. The airline's senior leadership had sent a memo to all employees, reinforcing the importance of respect and professionalism. Rachel knew it would take time for real change to take root, but this was a start. Settling into her first-class seat once again, she glanced out the window at the bustling activity on the tarmac below. The world was far from perfect, but in moments like this, Rachel felt a renewed sense of purpose. She wasn't just a passenger on a flight, she was a force for change, quietly shaping a better future for everyone who would follow. A lesson in respect and power. The terminal had fallen eerily quiet after the dramatic twist that Rachel Monroe had orchestrated. The employees who had mocked her only moments ago now stood frozen, their expressions a mix of disbelief and fear. The other passengers watched intently, some whispering to one another, others simply staring in awe. Rachel, however, remained composed, her posture radiating quiet strength. Jason and Amanda, the now disgraced airline employees, tried to process what had just happened. Jason cleared his throat, his face pale. Ms. Monroe, I didn't realize. Rachel held up a hand, silencing him with a look. Mr. Jason, she began, her tone steady but firm, this isn't about whether you realized who I am. It's about how you treat people, regardless of who they are. Amanda's eyes filled with tears, but Rachel's gaze didn't soften. Mockery, condescension, and unprofessionalism have no place here, or anywhere. It isn't just about customer service. It's about decency. A tall, sharply dressed man approached the counter. He was the airline's regional manager, having rushed over as soon as he received Rachel's call. Ms. Monroe, he greeted her with a deep nod, I'm so sorry for this experience. Please, allow me to personally rectify this situation. Rectify it, yes, Rachel said, her voice calm but resolute. Not just for me, but for every passenger who stands here and expects to be treated with respect. That is non-negotiable. The manager turned to Jason and Amanda. You both are relieved of your duties, effective immediately, he announced. Your behavior was inexcusable. Jason tried to protest, but Amanda grabbed his arm, shaking her head. They packed their belongings, avoiding the eyes of onlookers, and left the counter. The manager turned back to Rachel, his tone humble. "Ms. Monroe, I assure you, this situation will be addressed at every level of our operations." Rachel gave a small nod. "Good. Change starts from the top." The crowd that had gathered broke into scattered applause, their admiration for Rachel evident. Yet, she remained grounded, as though this was just another day in her life. The reveal. Rachel settled into her first-class seat, the upgrade offered immediately after the incident. As she sipped her champagne, a passenger seated nearby leaned over. "Excuse me," the woman said hesitantly, "but I have to ask, who are you?" Rachel smiled warmly. "I'm just someone who believes in accountability," she said simply, though her tone carried an air of mystery. The truth was more intricate. Rachel Monroe was a highly respected executive in the aviation industry, a pioneer who had worked tirelessly to advocate for fair practices and improve customer experiences. She wasn't just another passenger, but someone who wielded significant influence in shaping how airlines operated. This wasn't the first time she had stepped in to address such behavior, and it likely wouldn't be the last. But Rachel wasn't interested in flaunting her position or power. She believed that true change came not from fear but from instilling a culture of respect. Her goal was to ensure that no one, regardless of their status, ever faced the kind of treatment she had that day. A ripple effect. By the time Rachel's flight landed in Chicago, her actions had already sparked a chain reaction. News of the incident spread quickly, both within the airline and on social media, where passengers shared their accounts of what had happened. The hashtag Respect Matters began trending, drawing attention to broader issues of inequality and professionalism. The airline released an official statement, apologizing to Rachel and pledging to implement new training programs for their employees. "This incident," the statement read, "has reminded us of the importance of treating every individual with dignity and respect. We are committed to making meaningful changes." Rachel read the statement with a mixture of satisfaction and determination. Words were a start, but actions mattered more. Over the next few weeks, she worked closely with the airline's leadership to develop initiatives aimed at improving their customer service protocols. These included mandatory training sessions, anonymous feedback systems, and clear accountability measures. A quiet victory. Back at her office, Rachel received countless messages of support. Some came from friends and colleagues, while others were from strangers who had heard her story and felt inspired. One particularly moving email came from a young woman who worked as a flight attendant. "Dear Ms. Monroe," it began, "I just wanted to thank you for standing up for what's right. As someone who works in this industry, I've often felt powerless to address the unfair treatment passengers and employees face. Your actions have given me hope that things can change." Rachel replied personally, offering words of encouragement and reminding the young woman that change often started with individuals who refused to stay silent. The lesson. Months later, Rachel found herself at another airport, this time as a keynote speaker for a major aviation conference. Her topic, the power of respect in leadership. As she stood before an audience of industry leaders, her voice carried the same calm authority that had silenced Jason and Amanda. "Respect is not just a value, it's a responsibility," she said. "It's easy to forget, in the chaos of our daily lives, that every interaction is an opportunity to affirm someone's dignity. Whether you're serving passengers, leading a team, or simply existing in the world, how you treat others defines who you are." The audience erupted in applause, but Rachel wasn't there for recognition. Her mission was clear: to ensure that respect, empathy, and accountability became cornerstones of the industry she loved. As she stepped off the stage, Rachel felt a sense of fulfillment. The incident at the airport had been a turning point, not just for Jason and Amanda, but for the countless people who would now be treated with the kindness and professionalism they deserved. Rachel Monroe's quiet power had left an indelible mark, proving that sometimes, the most profound victories are those that ripple far beyond the moment.